on the list. If we see him, we can unmute him. Even if he's auto muted on calling in, we should be able to unmute him.
Okay.
Hey, do you have me right now? This is Steve Knott.
I see Stephen Knott.
Yeah, different interaction or interface than what we've been using before. Strange.
I'm gonna let you go. I believe we're just waiting on Diane.
So Jim Olson is on the phone. What about Dan?
Diane is coming up now.
They just joined, so they should be popping up here in a moment.
That was the weirdest sign on that I've ever had. It was different than the other times.
So
Yeah, that threw me.
we're trying this as a webinar, which allows the public to view it on Zoom as an attendee. So it just gives a little bit more option to the public for viewing capacity.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
Hi, Diane.
Hello there.
Hey, did the link to email get fixed? Because
Yes.
oh, there was some bad feedback.
Jim, is that you on the phone?
It's me, you think?
It could be me. This sounds like me.
Oh, boy.
There's Steve with the blank chair.
Yeah, Dan, Nils did go ahead and posted a new link. Like
I just
or
did
something.
that. I hand typed in the zoom.us and the 87 code meeting link, and
Yeah.
that's fine. We're here.
Yeah.
This is Bill Bray. I can see everybody on Zoom, but I can't see me.
Yeah, you won't be able to see yourself
Okay.
because we have
Should I
about
turn off
30
Zoom?
people. What you should do is mute your microphone until you're ready to speak.
Okay, he's been muted. We've got, I think, everybody but Jim. Eric, is Jim going to call in, or is Jim going to? You have to unmute yourself.
Jim is on my phone right now.
Okay.
Didn't we do
All right.
this once before? I feel like.
Yes.
Well, just so it works, this should be a short meeting. Is everyone ready, Amanda, do you think?
I think we're good.
Okay, I'd like to call to order this April 28th meeting it's a special common council meeting. It was posted and advertised, and the time is 7:05 that we're calling to order. This meeting is being conducted via remote conferencing software due to the state of emergency and the Wisconsin Governor's executive order. Members of the public may join the video or call, and we've provided the input information in our public posting. And I know that several of the community members and interested parties have joined the meeting, and I just want to welcome you. People should try to keep their microphones muted when they're not talking, and we will have an opportunity for public input here shortly. purpose of the meeting, number one, call to order and roll call. If Carrie, are you on? Could I allow you to do the roll call?
Sure. Mayor Kim Smith,
Here.
Tom Smith,
Here,
Dan Stevens,
Present.
Stephen Knott,
Present.
Jim Olson,
Present.
Diane Wolf.
Present.
Okay, all committee members are present. Thank you very much. Item number 2 is approval of minutes from the previous meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Jim Olson, seconded by Dan Stevens to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Continuing on with item 3 is public input. We'll ask if you are providing public input today, please state your name, your address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. I know we have several people who maybe want to talk. Who wants to go first?
Well, Bill Bray, this is Bill Bray, Bray, 264 Crestwood Lane, Onalaska. Interested in the alderman position. Been a citizen of Onalaska for many years, involved in the Onalaska Show Choir for being the president of it, announced boys and girls basketball games for 10 years, was president of the Y when we got the Y in Onalaska. President of the Onalaska Rotary, 2003 Commodore. Really love Onalaska. I've lived in different cities, and we came back here, and we just love it. And I'd like to have an impact in the future of Onalaska.
Thank you, Bill. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council?
Yes, this is Michael Brown.
Can you state your address, please?
It's 1906 Caledonia Street, La Crosse, Wisconsin. I am the president of the La Crosse City County Tavern League, and I just wanted to address you regarding these fees you got coming on for liquor licenses. I sure appreciate you bringing us on board. Small businesses are really struggling right now. Onalaska is actually the first one to vote on these set of rates, so you're kind of setting the tone for the rest of the municipalities. And it's really important that businesses can open up whenever we can, that we know we're a partnership with municipalities, and that you understand the tough difficulty we have in the last few months. And I hope you'll approve these rates. That'll give us a discount and help us get started when we can finally get our doors open. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mike. We'll be addressing that later in the agenda. Is there any other public member that would like to address the council? Second call for a member who would like to address the council. And this is the last call. And if you're having trouble, I'll give you one more chance if you'd like to address the council. Okay, not hearing anyone, we'll continue on with the agenda then. Under report from the mayor, I have item 4, appointment of Sam Cinta, 4104 Beverly Drive, Onalaska, to the Long Range Planning Committee. So I'll turn it over to the council. Dan Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate in the short week that you had that you were able to get some information to present to council for both item 4 and item 5. Just a brief summary helps us kind of differentiate from, a random name out of a phone book. Both Sam Cinta and Peg Benash looks like they would be a welcome addition to the city. And so with that, I guess if we just stick with item 4, I will move that we approve the appointment of Sam Cinta to the Long Range Plan Committee.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. We have a motion by Dan Stevens, seconded by Stephen Knott, to approve the appointment of Sam Cinta to the Long Range Planning Committee. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. Item 5, appointment of Peg Benash, 700 Westwood Drive on Alaska to the Room Tax Commission. Again, I'll turn it over to the council.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Peg Benash of 700 Westwood Drive on Alaska to the Room Tax Commission.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Stephen Knott, seconded by Tom Smith to appoint Peg Benash. Is there any discussion? Dan Stevens?
Thank you again, Your Honor. While I would fully support Peg Benash to the position, she's a friend of my spouse and has worked with my spouse, so I will be abstaining from this vote.
Thank you, sir. And I just want to mention too, to the public who may be listening, when we do a little bit of background on the candidates, we don't consider, education and experience. Of course, it's important, but we want to have a variety of different inputs of people. So there isn't any prerequisites for serving on a committee. The only prerequisite really is that you care about Alaska and that you want to serve. So that being said, are there any other comments from the committee? Okay, the motion on the floor is to approve Peg Benash. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. And we have one abstention. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for your approval of those appointments. Next is consideration and possible action on the following items. Item 6, the discussion and possible action on the vacancy of the 3rd Aldermanic District Council member. I guess Amanda did write a recap of what transpired last time. Maybe we should have Amanda just do it for the benefit of anyone who may be watching. Amanda, can you just recap what the, I guess we could say the rules are regarding this, the statutes?
Yeah, so there's a couple options. One option would be to appoint an individual for the term. It's essentially the full term that you'd be appointing for. So they would take office upon taking the oath after appointment, and then they would serve the remainder of the term. That is one option. If you select that option, then you would choose how you want to do the appointment process. So back in November, when Ms. Ayer had resigned due to residency issues, you elected to basically do a process where you had people submit applications and you interviewed people, and then you appointed at the next meeting, so you could decide to do that again. You could alternatively appoint someone until a November election was had. So that person would then have a short, I believe it would be about a 5-month term by the time everything was all said and done. And then there would be an election at the same time as the general November election to appoint somebody for the remainder of the term. You could leave the position vacant and have a November election. And then that person would immediately upon being sworn in after the November election take office for the remainder of the term. And then you do have the option in theory to have a special election at any time. This is made more challenging. And in fact, all of these timelines are a little bit more challenging because this is a general election year. And so we have election blackout dates. And so you can't have an election after August 1st other than the general election, which would give a very, very narrow window with which you could have a special election. So really about 3 weeks in July, the city could choose to pay for and host its own independent election for this position. There's a lot of downsides to that. We would bear the cost to do that entirely on our own. If we ended up needing a primary, ultimately it would end up getting pushed back to a November election anyway. And so while an option is kind of a difficult option, if there was a November election and there was a need for a primary, that primary would occur during the regular August primary. But those are kind of the 4 main options. A couple of the differences I pointed out between this and Ms. Ayer resignation that caused a vacancy that was filled last November is that that was a midterm vacancy. And so I know some concerns we had were the timing of elections and then also the confusion amongst having multiple elections for the same seat at the same time. And we don't have those issues this time around. We'd be looking at a November election when there's already election, and this would be the only local election on the ballot.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I'll turn it over to the council members then if someone has any comments or questions. Stephen Knott?
Two things. First off, just a correction. If I heard correctly, I believe that Amanda just misspoke. No big deal. But the third district, Bundy Iyer, was filled in by appointment in January, not in November. I believe I heard that it was in November, and I might have misheard too. So just want to make sure that's clear. But the second thing is, I as a third district alder person, I have misgivings about having the third district underrepresented for as much as 11 months, perhaps even more, depending, if they're going to wait until a November election or, so I guess I would like to see that we do appoint an individual,
Okay.
just to fill that position until November. That election be held. I understand that will not be cost prohibitive, whereas it's November until we can have an election again. That's kind of the option I'm looking at.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
And that, I assuming that November election, when I believe if I read correctly, would, I'm sorry?
You're really breaking up a lot, so I just was gonna try to make sure we were hearing you adequately.
Hello?
Hi. Are you done, Steve, or are you still talking?
I think we lost him.
I don't know what happened to Steve.
Yeah.
Perhaps before we go any further, we should check in with our city clerk who could talk about the pros and cons of the timing of an election. If you could, Carrie.
I think Amanda laid it out pretty clearly. The best option would be that November election, because that would allow us to stay in that same election cycle. Even if we would wind up with a primary and a regular election, it wouldn't be additional costs beyond just paying for a portion of the ballots, which would be minimal compared to paying for a whole entire election. So like I said, if you want to go the election cycle, I definitely would recommend that cycle. That would be the best cycle to do. Again, up to the council, as Amanda has already laid out, whether you want to do an appointment until that point in time, or again, the other option is to appoint for the entire term.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. And then Amanda has a comment.
I was just going to answer Steve's comment about my misspoking. I did to a certain degree. I wanted to just clarify. We began the process to fill her resignation in November. Steve was appointed in January, but it is about a 2-month process to fill an appointment. Just from a
All right, I understand. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad, Steve, that we didn't actually lose you. Okay, council members.
Mayor,
Yes.
this is Tom.
Okay,
hear me?
Tom. Yep,
You hear me?
Alderperson Tom Smith. I can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay, thank you. You're kind of in and out too, so.
Oh,
I
I'm
agree with.
sorry.
No, I'm good. I agree with Steve. I like the idea of having an election. I hate to see that both District 3 would be just with appointed positions through both those terms. This will allow us to maybe appoint someone until the November election, which fills that void, but then allow the citizens the opportunity to elect someone to represent them. I mean, Steve's doing a great job as District 3, but I like the idea of at least having some elected representative in District 3. And I think that compromise to me makes the most sense. So that's one I would support. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other people? Dan Stevens. You have to unmute. We can't hear you. Now you got to start over.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
This question, I'm not sure who can answer this best, perhaps Carrie, but can we talk about the logistics? If we were to do an appointment process, it struck me that using the Iyer resignation as a guide, that it was about a 3-month process before we were able to appoint somebody. So if we appoint somebody and then put it up for a November election, how long will their actual appointment be? And would it maybe make more sense to just save it for the election? And the follow-up question is, if we were to do a special election, while it's not real high up on my list, you mentioned that there's extra cost associated with that. What are the taxpayers looking at, and as far as the onus of having a special election? How much would it cost us to do that?
Well, election costs generally, like my flat out rate that I would give anybody is $10,000 for an election. This one would maybe be a little less in some areas because it's only involving one district. However, you have to realize some of the costs are the same, no matter whether it's for the whole city or not. Like say the publication costs, I have to do the same publications as I do for a regular election, no matter whether it's one district or all three districts. So we're still looking at, probably a minimum of $5,000. The real issue is it's very time consuming and we are already crammed for time with the other elections in there. So it is very hard to do. And if you had that July election and it turned into a primary, we would throw another election in there between the August and the November election. So we're talking about a lot of extra things. It could turn into 2 elections instead of 1 election.
I get it. And then could you follow up on what's the earliest if we chose to appoint somebody? How long would they actually be appointed before the, say we go with the November election route?
Well, I think the earliest it could be is well, depending upon what we do tonight, but the last time we announced it at one meeting, we took applications for 21 days. Then I handed over the applications to the alderpersons to make a decision. And then they made the decision of the appointment at that following meeting. The mayor brought forth the appointment list and then the council voted on the appointment that was suggested by the mayor. So basically that would take the May meeting and the June meeting. So by June you could have it. And then again, that election would be November. So you're talking about a 5-month term.
Okay, I think Eric had something he wanted to add. Eric?
Yeah. Outside of the question about costs on special election, we're also in a bit unprecedented times. We just exited an election that was not run smoothly, but no fault of ourselves locally. We did everything possible. We had some amazing staff to get things done, but the rules change on a regular basis. And when attorneys got involved, they weren't looking at the city of Onalaska, they were looking at the state whose rules we were following. If we were to have a special election, the one that's not on any other election calendar, and we decide that we're going to have in-person voting or mail ballots only voting or whatever it is that the council decides to do, we're putting our target on our own back for anybody that's going to claim one way or the other about how we're running the election. In these times, I would not recommend having a special election just because the rules are changing. And if we're creating our own rules, I think we're bound to enter litigation one way or the other.
Thank you, Eric. Is there another council member, Stephen Knott, and then Diane after that?
So I just want to say I both agree and disagree with Dan Stevens. So under normal circumstances, I would be open to just leaving it open until November. So we just have a nice smooth election transition. But this isn't, again, my biggest concern is this isn't normal. That position will have been open for 11 months then, almost a full year before we have that election. So in this particular case, since it's been open for so long, I still think that we should probably appoint somebody for that 5.5 month period from early June until the election in November.
Okay, that wasn't what I understood Dan Stevens to have said.
I think my understanding.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so let's just go to Diane and then we'll come back to that. There was a lot of feedback and we weren't able to understand what was said. Alderperson Diane Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see. Considering that council this last or earlier this year did appoint the current 3rd district alderperson, I personally would not feel comfortable appointing a second person for a remainder of almost a full term. So for me personally, that option would be out. Let's see, what are other, I personally also do not support a special election, number one, for the cost. And I have touched base with staff, and I agree with our city clerk that it would be too tall of an order to ask, I think, of our staff to have to perform and jump through the hoops, and also to ask for citizens to go through a special election at this time. But I just can't justify it at the cost of approximately $5,000 when we have other options available to us. I'm intrigued with the idea of appointing someone until the November election, but I'm equally fine with the possibility of leaving that position open until November, because it is going to take a few months for the appointment process. So I'm on the fence with that, but I will continue to listen to feedback this evening before I make my final decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderperson Wolf. Any other comments? Alder Stevens.
Sure. Maybe just to respond to a couple points. Alder Knott brought up some interesting perspective, but the practice of what we've seen over the last year is that, well, just for example, within the last week, I fielded a call and took care of it for a District 3 a citizen that lived off of French Road. And a few months ago, Alder Knott fielded a call from somebody from District 2. So it's not that there is no representation. It may not be ideal. And I understand completely Alder Wolf's point that at least one of those representatives ought to be somebody who's elected, duly elected from the 3rd district. And that's with respects to Alder Knott. In that case, there was extenuating circumstances, and with some of the things that were happening and the extenuating circumstances that Amanda touched on, and I believe I spoke to in November, it was kind of imperative that we took action at that point. I'm not sure that that's the case now. We've been operating okay. We have a mayor. We have our staff in place, with the exception of the fire chief, and we have the committee appointments that are currently filled. I'm not sure that. I mean, we can make the case, and I'm not necessarily for or against, but it seems like we're potentially maybe making some extra work for staff, and then bringing a new alder up to speed, only just to have that last for a few months. I could be talked into appointing and then having an election in November. Ideally, I would rather have it in August, but if there's a primary, I understand that is not feasible. And a cost of, if it's $10,000 for a special election, I don't know that we can justify that. I don't think that the taxpayers would endorse that approach. So for everything that's on the table, I guess my preference is to leave it vacant and just operate as we are now until that person is duly elected, whomever that could be. And then the second position, if it were the will of the council, would be to go through the appointment process and have the November election.
Okay, I'll thank you, Alder Stevens. Does anyone else have a comment, question? Amanda, do you have one?
I just was going to walk through that if you decide to do the option where you appoint and you order the special election in November, the period that you would be taking applications for appointment would also overlap the period that the person would obtain signatures to run for an election. And so you would be having somebody appointed or trying to decide which route they wanted to go without knowing what the future held, if they were going to be appointed or not. And so I don't know if that'll cause confusion among anyone or not, but just know that those time periods overlap, if that makes sense, that you're going to be looking for resumes for appointment at the same time you're going to be urging people to go get their signatures.
Thank you, Amanda. Alder Wolf.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I was just thinking about that, also the timeline and the 21 days. And I'm thinking also that as of tonight, we're still not sure when we're going to be open for business fully. And I, for one, am hopeful that if we were to, any future times that we're looking at appointing a council person, that we would, if we did go the appointment route, that we would hopefully use the previous model that we just did in December and January. I thought it worked very well, but my concern would be how would we be implementing that in the middle of what we're all involved with right now, and the timeline with all of that. I would prefer not to be doing it remotely and such. So I think for me personally, I have my answer based on the input that I've heard, and now what Amanda has weighed in with the crossover with the application process and such. This evening, I will be supporting leaving the position vacant and ordering the special election for November. At least we'll know by June 1st whether or not a primary will be needed. And I appreciate the mayor having the foresight to go ahead and fill those committee appointments now. So going forward, we're set for this council year until someone, if we choose the election route in November, until that person were to be able to take that seat. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Wolf. Alder Smith.
Yeah, I changed my mind. I think the overlapping, that we just talked about, I think is a concern. And with so much going on and with trying to get ready for the November election, which we all know is going to be a challenge in itself, I think we should leave it open. No, I was kind of torn either way. I like the idea of appointing it, but by the time you do that, and then that person, if they wanted interested in actually filling the full term, they have the papers. I think we better offer to leave it open and have the November election and do it right. And then we're all back in sync. So that's my thoughts. I've changed my mind.
Thank you, Alder Smith. Carrie, so adding this to the November election cycle, what is the estimated cost of that? Or is it just comparable to if we just waited till April?
It will probably cost us the additional costs, we're already bearing the cost of the election workers, the notifications, publications, things like that already, because we're having an election. So the only cost that we would bear is the portion of the cost for the ballots, because we normally don't have a local office on the ballot. So we would have to pay a portion of that cost, but I roughly would think it probably wouldn't cost us more than probably $250 to $500.
Okay.
So it's very minimal compared to an election.
And then either Amanda or Carrie, I thought there was a rule that the local elections had to be on the spring ballot. Oh, Amanda's talking, but her
So they had updated the statutes in 2019, and they came into effect in March. And so if you look at our ordinance, there's a kind of a timeline that was removed from the statutes. And so we have to follow the requirements in, I believe it's 850, 8.50 of the Wisconsin statutes. And so I did confirm that with the Wisconsin Election Commission, which gave us the two options as far as having this unique July. You can order a special election at any time. You just bear the cost of the municipality, or the November in a non-general election year, we would have been able to have an August primary, like with the August primary election, but because there's a blackout in this, we don't have to. But because of the timing of this, we were still able to have a November election. You just have to be able to order it. And it gets really specific. There's like a window, which is why we had to have this meeting, because the window that we could order a November election fell like a day before our May meeting. And so we couldn't have made this decision in May and still had a November election. And so it gets very technical in the dates.
Okay, thank you. Committee, council, anything else?
I'd like to make a motion that for the memo dated April 23rd, 2020, that's in our packet, that we go with option 3 to leave the position vacant and order a November election.
I have a motion on the floor by Diane. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Motion by Alderperson Diane Wolf, seconded by Alderperson Tom Smith to go with option 3, which is to leave the position vacant until a November election. Okay, under discussion, Stephen Knott.
Yeah, I was just curious if, based on the emergency order, if we had some flexibility to maybe shorten the timeline and get this decided by May if we went through a temporary appointment, maybe do 14 days of advertising before we collect resumes. Is there any flexibility to that?
I'll defer to the city attorney to answer that question.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'll call for the vote then. The motion on the floor is to concerning the 3rd district aldermanic district council member, that the council is deciding to leave the position vacant until the November election. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 7 is resolution 23-2020. This is,
I'm sorry if I can interrupt.
yes, sir.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just had a temporary internet glitch go on, but actually my vote would be a nay.
Okay, I am sorry. Thank you for clarifying that. So
Yeah.
we have 5 yes and 1 no. Is that correct?
I think we have 4 yes and 1 no.
Okay, 4,
Yeah.
I can't count to 5 because there's not
That's the
actually.
reason for the motion, yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry about that. Thank you, everyone, for helping the team effort here tonight. All right, so the motion does carry, but not unanimously. Now, resolutions, item 7, resolution 23-2020 is a resolution reducing the 2020 liquor license fees as a result of the COVID-19. We did have a request from the La Crosse Tavern League to consider reducing the fees. We had discussion with it. It's something that normally would have come through committee, but since we're not having any committee meetings, it's coming right up to council. Maybe can let Amanda, you did the background work on this, didn't you? We're looking into.
Yeah,
Let Amanda do a brief recap because we haven't had any discussion on this, so let's discuss it. Amanda?
so the mayor had gotten the letter from the Tavern League, which we've attached. And so in what little discussion we were able to have last week, and what I was able to look up, because it's something that we approve by resolution, the only way to amend it is by resolution. And so that was why it was put forth in the form of a resolution. We currently, and Carrie, please correct me if I'm wrong on these, for the Class A liquor and the Class B liquor, I believe our current fees are $450. And then for Class A, I believe they were $100. And so we do have the ability to go down on the Class A liquor and Class B liquor are $450. Class A beer and Class B beer are $100. So the ones that are at 50 are, I believe, are at $450, and the ones that are 10, I believe, are at about $100. And I'll let Carrie interject if I'm wrong.
I think the Class A liquors might be at $425, the Class B liquor might be at $450, and the Class A beer is at $75, and the Class B beer is at $100. So
Okay.
they're just slightly different.
And so we are allowed on the ones that are at 50, that is the lowest a city can authorize those. With the other two that are at $10, you could in fact go to no fee. However, this was a heavily talked about topic on the League of Wisconsin Municipality Attorney Conference last week, and there is a statutory provision that talks about how these licenses are really issued when the fee is paid. And so just out of kind of an abundance of caution, I had just put them at a low amount. And so you're not married to these numbers. You're welcome to decide not to change them at all, or to change them to kind of any amount between where they're currently at and $50 for the liquor, and any amount, the amount that they're at, down to $0 for the beer. But we just put this out there because we've gotten the request, and so we had to have a resolution for you to consider it.
Okay, are there any other question, comments, discussion points? Stephen Knott.
So, yeah, I think that during these times right now with the small businesses that, anything we can do to help them is probably a good thing. The only question I guess I'd like to ask is on the finances, how much impact will this have on the city budget if we do this?
I don't know who wants to, Fred or Carrie. Carrie?
I just did a rough estimate on that, and we're roughly over 17,000 with what we currently have on file now for licenses. If there would be new licenses coming in later in the year, it would affect those also. So, but roughly around 17,000.
Is that something we can absorb without too much pain?
I guess we'll go to Eric Rindfleisch, City Administrator.
Yeah, 17,000 is 17,000, and it's not a small number. But on one hand, it's well within any given year, the range of margin of error is not the word I'm looking for, but well within the range of additional revenues, decreased revenues that one could expect to see. Last year, for example, on our interest, we achieved so much more. This year, we're likely to get less interest. I really can't answer how it's going to impact. I mean, 70,000 will impact the budget, but I think it's within what's doable if the council decides to make a decision.
Thank you, Eric. Alder Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually have a few questions. So first, for City Clerk Carrie Burmaster, the Class A licenses, these are not for bars and taverns. They're for like grocery stores and gas stations and things of that nature. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our bars and restaurants are the Class B.
Okay, so I guess I don't understand why the Class A licenses are requesting a change. It strikes me that if bars are closed, more people might go buy their beer and alcohol from a grocery store or a gas station. They may actually have seen those sales increase. And so the Class B being taverns, I can certainly see how they're affected. But this will bring into the next question, which is the figures that we have for all the licenses. How do we derive those? So how much of those fees offset necessary costs to the city for operating, or is this just kind of a revenue enhancement for the city?
Okay, I'm not sure. We'll go to Eric Rindfleisch.
All fees generally have to have a relationship with the cost of processing and the purpose of having a license. So we talk about revenue enhancements. That's really not the purposes of these licenses and fees. It's to offset the cost for the clerk's department and Carrie to do the work, the background checks, the processing, the fees, and so on. So yes, the 17,000 shortfall, what Carrie estimated, is revenue that would offset the cost of doing the business.
All right.
Now,
So,
can the full fund make it up? Yes, I think it can make it up somewhere else. But no, there is a direct relationship between the fees charged and the cost of processing those fees. So there will be an impact, yes.
okay, so if there's actual expense that's associated with the fees, by waiving these fees, it seems to me that we're then passing the cost on to the taxpayer. And the counterpoint to that, which we could look at, is if these fees are negotiable. If we really want to be business friendly, if we wanted to lower the fees, we should maybe perhaps look at doing that on a more permanent basis. So if there's a good reason for the fees, I would say fine, so be it. And we should probably keep those in place. And if there's not a good reason for the fees, we should probably not assess that on Alaska businesses. So I'm not sure which direction I really want to go on this, and I would like to hear what everyone else has to say.
Thank you, Alder Stevens. Let's turn to Alder Knott.
Yeah, first off, terrific point, Dan, on the difference between the Class A and B and who's affected. So, yeah, with that understanding, I have no issue
Oh, boy.
looking at the Class B licenses slightly differently. And maybe not even, and that the B licenses for beer and liquor pretty much do impact primarily small business in our area. And that
Kirk
I
is
don't-
gonna have fun
those
with
jobs
that.
that could potentially
Can
be at risk
anybody
for all
hear
these
him?
additional costs that these small
It's not working.
businesses have.
I can't lip read either.
Steven,
Now he's frozen.
oh, now your picture, okay, Aldernaut, if you can hear me, can you try?
Is this any different?
No, I was thinking if you could try muting whatever audio you have going on, and isn't there a number he can dial in on his phone? And use his phone to talk to us rather than his computer perhaps? I'm just trying to brainstorm, Nils.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because I want to hear, I want to hear what he has to say. So, yeah. I want
right,
to hear
yeah,
it.
I mean, we can just pause a minute while we kind of sort it out.
He can call,
Okay.
the number is 1-312-626-6799. It's also on the bottom of the email and also on the agenda.
Okay, I don't know what's going on because I actually have full signal on my end and I keep checking, so I don't know what, but I'm getting kicked now twice. But regardless,
But
this
it's
is a good time for me to do my discussion points again?
Well, we can't hear you is the problem. It's all garbled up. So we're trying to get you to try calling in on your phone, and you can still
Okay.
use your video from your computer, but try using your phone for the audio. Because we want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, I'll be calling in here momentarily.
So if you could just mute, yeah, perfect.
Please mute.
I wasn't sure if it was just me.
No.
We'll just pause and give him a chance to.
Hi, this is Bill Bray. I think I'm going to head out. I got the information I needed,
Okay.
just to
thank
let you know.
Thank
Okay,
you.
have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The transcriptionist is gonna have fun with this.
Poor Kirk.
Is Jim Olson still with us?
Oh, sure. I'm just sitting back there smiling.
Okay. If we could just merge you and Steven. We could have audio and visual.
While we have this break, Carrie, if there is a primary election for the 3rd district seat, when would that be?
That would be with the August partisan primary.
So August 11th?
Yes.
Good thing we're not in radio. We're allowed to have dead air.
So does everyone like my pirate flag?
Yes, it's really
Yeah, I
nice.
saw that.
I'm a fan of tall ships and all that.
Okay, I'm in.
There.
Okay, Steven.
All right, so I'll start again. So first off, I really appreciated what Dan was saying and pointing out the difference between the businesses who have the Class A and the businesses who have the Class B. So I would have no problem considering them separately, being that the Class B is licenses are the ones that would affect the small businesses in our area. I also would believe that they would be the ones most at risk with the additional costs of doing business without revenue or with lowered revenue, that they could be at risk of having to lay off employees who could potentially be Alaska residents, things of that nature. So I'm kind of looking at, if the Class B licenses are the ones that affect the small businesses, maybe we should just be looking at them in any kind of resolution.
Thank you for your comments. Alder Knott. Who else would like to speak?
I have some follow-up questions.
Okay, let's go to Alder Wolf because I don't think she's weighed in on this, and then we'll go to Alder Stevens next.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know when I talked with our city clerk about this in person yesterday, maybe if she could expand on this a little bit as far as when these are due, possibly those people who have already paid, and if this were to pass, what would the repercussion of that be? Thank you.
Okay, Carrie Burmaster, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Honor. Basically, we mail out letters for renewals in March. The payments are requested to be back to us by May 10th. As of today, we have probably only 2 outstanding Class A licenses out. The rest of them have already paid their fees. The Class B establishments are the ones that are closed, and we have probably only about 16% of those back. So we don't have very many of the Class B licenses back due to the nature of the business and the situations we're in right now. So basically, if this would pass as presented tonight with the Class A and the Class B licenses in here, the finance department would end up having to do refund checks to all the establishments that have already paid. So they would have to be doing a process of sending back that money. The other situation that we do have, however, though, is in our ordinances, we do require that any of their other fees are paid before we release their license. And some properties have some other outstanding bills that we would probably be needing to put this money towards instead of actually doing a refund to them. So like I said, as Alder Stevens did state, the Class B establishments are affected more, I would say, than the Class A establishments. I know in this time, everybody's affected in a different way. So it's hard to weigh, in what way they're all affected, but directly to the licensing, I would say that statement would be correct.
Carrie, when you said some of these businesses have other fees that are outstanding, just for not anybody specific, but just as a reference, like what would those fees?
Normally what I have and what I work off at this time of the year is our personal property listing, because those fees were paid and doable. And a lot of times those are the last fees that we're collecting from some establishments before their licenses can be issued.
Okay, so theoretically, there's businesses that are closed right now because they're required to be closed, but maybe not only haven't paid their liquor or beer license, they also haven't paid their property taxes.
The personal property, yes.
Personal property, okay. Okay, and let's see, Diane, were you done then, or were you still going?
Oh, no, I'm done. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, then we'll go to Alder Stevens.
Thank you again, Your Honor. So right now we are speaking about particularly liquor license as a resolution item. But we have other things that we permit for and collect fees on. So for this question is aimed at either Carrie or Eric. Are we risking opening the door to kind of a precedent where if there's a hardship where other entities that apply for a permit now kind of see it's, hey, let's just go ask and see if we can get the city to cut us checks back, and other entities that we permit for are going to say, hey, this has affected us too. We want money back. What's the total exposure if we were to do that? So how much money actually comes in through permit fees, not just for liquor, but as a whole?
Okay, who wants to field
That's
that?
for Carrie, I guess she can't tell that I'm looking at her. Right?
Yeah. And
Okay,
I
Carrie?
can't tell you what the permit fees are because a lot of those come through, say, like the inspection department.
Right.
They're from other departments. I don't have what those figures are. I'm sure they're substantial in, what they are and how they would be related to this. I don't know what that would look like.
So I guess to use that example, then if a builder were to come and say, hey, things are kind of tough right now, I would like a break on the permit fees. If we were to approve this, are we giving disparate treatment between one industry and another? So I think if we approve this, and I understand the want, but will that have ramifications into other areas of the permitting process? And what would the financial risk then be to the taxpayers? So that was kind of more of a statement rather than a question. We'll call it a rhetorical question. But so that is a concern. And again, I'm not sure how I'm going to fall on this.
Okay, let's go to Eric.
I can answer the rhetorical question perhaps in a few ways. First, I'll reflect back on the statement earlier. The fees should be calculated, have a direct relationship to the work necessary to process the fees. Yes, they bring in revenue, but there's always the other side of that ledger, which is the expenses necessary to offset that. To the fact that we're reducing those fees, yes, it would be looking at reducing a fee less than the cost of processing and the purpose of that fee. So I think that similar question you had before about are they just too high or should we not be taxing the fees? Again, the fees are only applied to those that are using a service of the city for the purpose of processing and that service that the city provides. That's what fees are. So to the answer, so yes, there is an impact to it, and yes, by reducing it, we are reducing it to lower than the activity that's necessary for the city to do. The other way also then is precedence, and I think Amanda can better answer this question, is only when the council establishes precedence in one activity, there is no precedence you're tying over to future councils, to future years, to future similar nature. The precedence is only the action of the council. If you feel that you've created precedence that you are obligated to follow, you can do so. But activities taken by prior councils do not dictate the actions of this council, nor the activities that taken this council dictate future actions of this council or any future council. So the theoretical example of, say, builders at the same time, that would be a completely independent conversation. Yes, you're going to have to reflect on the fact that you perhaps have given one business sector a break on a fee less than the activity cost. And do you feel obligated to do the same thing? That's a political question that you'd have to yourself answer, but you're not obligated to do so simply because you've done one over the other. It's a decision that you yourselves make each and every time.
Thank you for that, Eric.
Amy
Okay.
Atkinson is on the line too, if you did have any specific questions related to like planning or development fees.
Okay, does the council have any other questions or comments for anybody?
All right, I'll make a motion, I guess. I am, generally speaking, based on the discourse, not in favor of lowering the fees for the reason stated. So I'm going to move that we deny resolution number 23-2020.
Okay, motion on the floor is to deny resolution 23-2020. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Motion has been made by Alderperson Dan Stevens, seconded by Alderperson Diane Wolf. Discussion.
Mayor,
Eric Reinfleisch.
the motion to deny can create a confusing double negative, or an aye vote would be a negative action. But may offer a suggestion to move to file the resolution as presented. Gets it taken, it disposes of the item itself.
Thank you.
The positive action is the file, and yes would be to file, would be my suggestion, but You already have a motion. It's up to you to decide what you do.
I will remove my second.
All right, Alder Stevens, what is your pleasure?
I'll remove my motion and restate as a motion to file resolution 23-2020.
I will second that motion.
Okay, the motion on the floor is by Alder Stevens, seconded by Alder Wolf to file resolution 23-2020, which will in effect leave the fees as they already are and result in no change to the city process. Is there any other discussion? Not seeing any discussion. So all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, item 8, review and consideration of the changes to the fire chief job description. Hope, are you on the line?
I am.
Can you recap the changes that you made to the job description, please?
Yeah, so last night we had Police and Fire Commission, and all of those changes that I made at that meeting were approved. And no additional changes were made. So basically the changes that were made were just some minor changes to the essential job functions and kind of just to clean up some of the language in there, kind of changing some of the essential job functions where we kind of put it in the relative order of importance, just including like assures enforcement of statutes, fire codes, and ordinances. Under C, the institution of appropriate chain of command. And F kind of cleaned that up. It was like 2 sentences, basically, or almost like 2 different sentences, and it was really wordy. So I just kind of made it into one. And then essentially like cleaning up some of the other stuff with the EOC, where they serve as kind of the team, and then just kind of clarifying as part of that team, they're coordinating, reviewing, and training staff as part of that. Really just not a whole lot of other changes, updating kind of the knowledge and skills with the computers. A lot of our language says PCs, and we're not really using that terminology anymore. And then under training, there was a lot of language in there that talked about International Fire Service accreditation, fire officer 2 or 3. And I think that was language that Dominic had put in there years ago. And I felt like that narrowed the pool. And so I really just felt that that needed to be preferred. And I think police and fire also felt that. So that language was just changed to say preferred instead of required. But otherwise putting the physical requirements into the new ADA format, just like we're doing with the rest of the job descriptions. But otherwise, the majority of those changes were really just kind of cleanup. We had, like I said, police and fire approved those changes without any additional changes, so.
And this did pass through police and fire last night?
Yes, it did pass. Basically, they passed it unanimously, 5-0. And then we also had Amanda reviewed the job description as well, just to make sure that legally it looked good.
Thank you. Okay, council, what's your pleasure? Have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I do. In the future, I would ask that when we make changes to something, whether it's approved or not, by, in this case, police and fire, this is Jim Olson, by the way. Could you give us a page of the old language and the new language, so we can compare the two? Even though that's been approved, I'd like to see what changes were made.
So a markup page.
Yeah, and I apologize because of the timing. I literally worked on this on Sunday to get it to police and fire. And so I actually emailed the PFC members, and it completely escaped my mind to email the council members. I did have it on the agenda for the Police and Fire Commission online, but completely spaced it out this morning and today to attach it to the council. So I will work on doing better about that in the future. So Jim, you are correct. I should have had that attached to something or emailed the council, and I did not do that. So I do apologize for that, and I will do better in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Hope.
welcome.
And this agenda, this council agenda, it started out just being one item meeting, and just throughout last week, one thing after another happened, and we kept adding things on. So it was in constant change throughout. So I apologize for that as well.
Yeah.
Did anyone hear what Jim said?
He understands.
Okay, good. Okay, so back to item 8, the fire chief job description. What is the pleasure of the council?
I'll make a motion. This is Tom. I'll make a motion that we approve the changes to the fire chief job description as stated in item number 8.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Alder Smith, seconded by Alder Knott to approve the fire chief job description. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say no. Motion carries unanimously. Item 9 is review and consideration of a stipend for Assistant Fire Chief Goody for performing the additional duties of the fire chief. Upon receiving the resignation of Chief Hayes, I asked Assistant Chief Goody to temporarily step in until it could be passed through the PFC and the council. And last night, the PFC did approve him to act as chief until a new chief has been determined on a permanent basis. And so then now we're bringing this to the council to consider a stipend as applicable for the extra duties he'll be performing. Maybe I'll put it to Hope to recap what has happened previously. Assistant Chief Goody has served in this role before, so we do have a historical precedent. I think I'll have Hope recap that if that's okay with you, Hope.
Yep. So I went back and looked at what we'd had for previous stipends for other staff members. And what we had done for Troy in the past was considerably lower. When we'd had Bria leave, who was one of our department heads, we had given the assistant $500 a pay period. And then when we've had Katie on leave, we've given other department heads, split those duties up to $500 a pay period. And in lieu of the fact that this is the third time that Assistant Chief Goody has had to act as acting chief, we have a pandemic going on right now and we're short-staffed. I'm asking that we give him $750 a pay period to act as the acting chief. The pay difference between him and the police and the fire chief, I should say, is significant. So I think there should be plenty of vacated salary to cover the expense for this, along with the benefits. And I think that this would be greatly appreciated by the acting chief.
Thank you, Hope. Alder Stevens.
Thank you. Just to clarify, so the stipend of $750 would be budget neutral or actually budget positive to the city because of the funds that are not being paid to former Chief Hayes.
That would be correct.
And I think
Is Troy feel good about this? I mean, does he want to be interim fire chief?
Yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead. He is happy to serve the community. You know, he's a very community minded person, and he believes in the fire department, and he has a long history there. He's committed to doing what's best for the department, and I think that he knows that what's best for the department right now is for him to be the chief. I don't think that he wants to be in that role indefinitely, but he's definitely willing to step up and fill in that role. But Hope, I was going to ask you too, I think we talked about with this additional, with his base rate as the assistant chief plus the stipend, is he making what Chief Hayes was making previously?
No,
So he would still be below the wage of the previous with $7.50 per period.
Yes.
Just to kind of put it in perspective for you all.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions? Alder Wolf.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to make a motion to approve the agenda. Approve the stipend for the now acting Fire Chief Troy Goody in the amount of $750 per pay period. And I will reserve my time, please.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Who is that?
Alderman Knott.
Okay, motion on the floor by Diane Wolf, seconded by Alder Stephen Knott, to approve the stipend at a rate of $750 per pay period. And the floor goes back to Alder Wolf.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to take a moment. I saw Troy yesterday at Police and Fire Commission, but I would just like to publicly thank him for stepping up once again and leading our department. He just recently celebrated, I believe it was his 27th work anniversary with the city last week. And I just want to thank him for his service. Thank you, Troy.
Is Troy on the call?
Yes, he is.
He is, but he's muted right now.
he is, but he's muted.
Is he blushing?
He's not on video. He's just on audio, I believe.
Okay, well, we want him to know
He
how
might
much
be off
Oh,
mute.
she just unmuted me. So can you guys hear me now?
we
Yes.
can hear you now. We
Oh,
wanted
okay.
we wanted to tell you how much we appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's an honor to serve again as interim chief or acting chief. Thank you.
Thanks, Troy.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So then the motion is to approve the stipend at $750 per pay period. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And thank you again, Chief Booty. Item 10, closed session. To consider a motion to convene in closed session under section 18.85, paragraph 1, paragraph E of the Wisconsin statutes for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or the conducting of other specified business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Specifically, the IAFF, International Association of Firefighters, Local 127 union negotiations. If any action is required in open session as a result of the closed session, the council will reconvene in open session to take the necessary action and or continue on with the printed agenda. Do we have a motion?
Move that we go into closed session.
Second, Diane.
Motion by Alder Stevens, seconded by Alder Wolf to go into closed session. The voting is by roll call. Carrie, could you manage that? Oh, you're muted. I mean, I can do it. You're, oh,
I got it.
Carrie.
okay. Sorry, Carrie.
Okay, Tom Smith,
Yes.
Dan Stevens,
Aye.
Stephen Knott,
Aye.
Jim Olson, Diane Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you. The vote was unanimous. We are in closed session and the time is 8:14. Thank you for those who were joining us. We appreciate you attending our meeting and we're all getting better at this.
So at this time, we would just ask that any of those individuals that are listening in to please leave the call.
The Brady Bunch.
I'm gonna add you in here.
All right, I need to ask. I've always pronounced it stipend. Is it stipend or stipend, or does it matter?
I believe it's stipend. That's how I guess I thought it was, but it could be both. I don't know.
Long I.
I normally say things wrong, so don't go by how I say it.
Steve, I just want to verify that this is you 785-341-0656.
Yes, that's me.
Okay, then we do have everybody off the call. Give me one moment. I'm going to stop the live feed.
Does anyone need a brief moment